like I've seen grown up men who are properly healthy, they're partying, they're enjoying their life, but they're like, well, you know what, I have social anxiety, I can't work. And for years, they will sit at home and complain that they're anxious, that they can't work. And I don't understand that. This is just a like stupid excuse.
What's up, it's your boy Namdi and you're watching the Talk DXB. To skip to the main points of this video, click on the timestamps in the description below.
What's up guys, welcome back to the Talk DXB. This week we're going to be discussing mental health in today's youth. And we have a guest speaker with us today, the lovely Nikki. Nikki, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I have a background in psychology. My BSc was in psychology and then my master's was in global mental health. And so mental health is something I'm very passionate about. And I think there's a lot that we can talk about with today's youth.
Perfect. So I want to start it off with my annoyance, right? Something that bugs me, especially in today's society. Yeah, it's become a crutch for a lot of people, right? And it's also been sort of thrown out there, you know, unreasonably. Like, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but in a lot of cases, for example, you break up with your partner after dating for 3 weeks, and then you put up a status, oh, I'm so depressed. Like that, to me, that's like, what are the chances that you actually are? You know what I mean? I'm not saying for everyone it's the same, but I'm saying that for someone to say that I'm depressed or that I'm suffering or that I'm going through this and that, I feel like if they are feeling that way, they should be diagnosed. They should go and see someone, because to me, it's not a joke. It's not. It shouldn't be a trend. It shouldn't be cool. You know, you have a lot of rappers nowadays. I listen to their music. I love their music, but it's very, people call it emo, very, you know, depression, anxiety. I suffer with this. I take this, Xanax and blah, blah, blah. And now it's become this trendy illness to have, oh, I'm depressed, oh, I'm anxious, I have social anxiety. No, you're shy. Just calm down. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like it's been stretched too far, and because of that, people who actually suffer then take a step back. You know what I mean? Like, the light is taken off people who actually need guidance, support, help, because everyone is using it. So if someone is suffering, it's like, okay, so everyone is suffering.
I'm gonna agree and disagree. So you did point out a few really good topics there. Like, I understand why you would say that people wanna move back, because like it's become such a trend, especially like those people who actually do have social anxiety and do have that anxiety from coming forward and talking about their issues, that I see how it might impact them. But I think that people should see that, okay, if people are just shy and they go like, oh, I have social anxiety, and you genuinely think you have social anxiety, that should be like, okay, so I'm not alone. I can go and talk to someone. Okay, I genuinely have like general anxiety disorder, different types of anxiety disorders, and talk to someone, get therapy, get help, and maybe not necessarily that extreme, but see what these people are doing, right? Or other people who do say they have this type of disorder are doing, right? And implement that in your life. Now, one thing I might disagree with you about is, yes, some people might break up with their boyfriend or girlfriend and put a status, say they're depressed. They actually might be depressed, because that's actually, it's called situational depression.
Yeah.
Now, a therapist won't classify you as depressed because it's a situational depression. That's DSM-5.
Would that not be considered as sad or sadness?
Well, sadness is, there's difference, right? There's a difference, like you can be sad, but then depression is something that lasts for a lot longer than a sadness period, right? So if you are going to go see a psychologist or a psychiatrist to get diagnosed with depression, there is massive caution in the DSM, which is the diagnostic manual that people use to diagnose mental illness. There is caution in there that you need to look at the situation that the person's in. And there's a whole list of criteria that you have to meet, and you have to meet a certain number of that criteria in order to be diagnosed with depression or any mental illness. And so there are situations that you will be sad in if something happens, like bereavement, for example, or the loss of the end of a relationship, the loss of something. And there is a normal, like a mourning period that people go through. That's different for different people. depending on the kind of relationship it was, or the person and the importance it was to you. So the period is going to be different for different people, but there is caution in the DSM that you need to look at the situations that they're in. And if it is just one situation, for example, bereavement, then you can still receive counseling, you can still receive treatment for that, but you wouldn't necessarily get a diagnosis. But there is a difference between sadness and depression. Like the depression is kind of something, it's like longer lasting, to put it like, kind of like to simplify it a lot.
I feel like mental illness, because it's been discussed in so many places and there's so much information about it, people tend to think, oh my God, I'm feeling like this, so why don't I Google it and I will diagnose myself. There's this issue that people tend to just diagnose themselves, oh my God, something bad happened in my life, so I'm depressed and I'm going to tell everyone I'm depressed. And there are two things which really piss me off, to be honest, is that it's usually done by people who are looking for an excuse, like not to do something, not to work, let's say. Like I've seen grown-up men who are properly healthy, they're partying, they're enjoying their life, but they're like, well, you know what, I have social anxiety, I can't work. And for years, they will sit at home and complain that they're anxious, that they can't work. And have the government support them. I don't understand that. This is just a stupid excuse because there's too much, again, availability of information at some point.
Okay, but then if we take away the availability of information, people are not going to know where to go, right? People aren't going to know that they can go out and there's people out there that are like them. There are statistics that show that 75% of people that need access to mental health intervention don't have access to it. Yeah. And that's in a lot of lower to middle income countries, but even in high income countries, you've got issues where it's so stigmatized, right? That people are like, oh, I can't go and talk to anyone about it. But with this, and I get what you're saying, like there are people that use it that way, but then there's probably underlying reasons for them doing that. Right? There's probably other issues that they're going on with their life, and this is one label that they can put onto that because it's something everyone will understand to a degree, right? And then to just go back on the people with mental illness, people there's no real way that it looks, right? So people can be out and they can be socializing and they can appear to be perfectly happy, but they're actually really depressed. And there's also this change in what it looks like for people. Is people always assume you have to look a certain way to have a certain illness or to have a certain mental illness. You have to look a certain way, you have to behave a certain way, but that's not necessarily the case at all. And there are cases of people being fully functioning and super happy and going out about their business and their lives, but they're actually really clinically depressed and they need to get treatment for that. So it's a very complex issue, and I think I understand what you're saying about people using it as an excuse, and I think there are people that do that, but that could be said for anything. Yeah. You know, like people will phone in sick and be like, oh, I had bad sushi last night, I'm really sick, I don't want to come into work. You know, it's like, I don't like comparing those two situations, but you will always have people that do that. Mm-hmm. People will always find something to use as an excuse for not doing something, and it just happens at the moment, it's mental health, because that's something that there's been so much awareness brought up onto.
Now that's exactly why I wanted to speak about it, right? Like beyond the fact of awareness, because that's something that needs to happen, especially in a place like Dubai, for example, where there's so much expectation, especially in the Arab community, you know, your family, there's expectation and stuff like that, with the culture and stuff like that. The awareness is one part, but another reason I wanted to do this is for people who know that they aren't suffering with depression. For people who will watch this and be like, I'm actually part of the problem. Because someone who's actually suffering, you know, because I'm sure you would know someone who is suffering with depression, they always feel like they aren't worth it, and someone else, okay, they are suffering as well, so I'm not alone, so, you know, I will deal with what I'm going through. And it's not necessarily easy to handle, okay? I've been diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety. And for me to see someone who I know and interact with, and I've told, like, I have depression, I have anxiety, I'm on medication for it, and they have said in the past that they are depressed, but when they know that I actually am, it's like a...
They're
they
attention
realize
seeker.
what they're saying.
Yeah.
I
like,
hate that.
For me, it's the diluting the problem or diluting the severity of it, because there's so much to come from self-harm, suicidal thoughts, like it's leading, you know, it's increasing as the generations go on and on. The suicide and all of that linked to depression is increasing. And not that there's a lack of awareness, but there's a lack of action on the awareness. Everyone is aware of what depression is, what anxiety is. Everyone can Google it, the meaning, but nobody is doing anything. So many people don't have access. So many people feel, especially men, they feel it's almost like not masculine.
No, absolutely.
And it's that sort of ideology that I want to sort of attack. Absolutely. You know what I mean? It's when it's being thrown around and when it's being diluted as such, someone who's actually suffering, that self-worth is almost reduced even more, because now it's not that big of a problem anymore to everyone else. Everyone is suffering from depression. What makes me any more worthy?
Yeah, and I feel like because of that, the people who are actually suffering with some mental illness, they tend to just go low and not even talk about it. So in the end, they suffer even more because they don't know like what to do themselves. Like if I go tell my friend, they will be like, oh my God, you're just seeking attention. If I go, and then automatically kind of just blocks my way and affects me even more, let's say. So I feel like that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's the worst part. Like if you're seeking support and you're actually suffering from depression and you're going to someone and you're like, look, I need to talk, this is what's going on, but they've had like several other people come with the same problem, they look at you like, oh, another one?
Everyone's depressed.
It takes away that support system. You're looking at someone and you can see they don't believe you. They're like, oh, what's going on? Had a bad breakup, lost your dog, or you're suffering, or just get over it, man up, go have a drink. Like things like that is, I feel, causing more harm than good. And I put a post on Instagram, and as you said, it came across in the wrong light because of how I put it across, and that's why I clarified it a little bit more. And it's very important for people who are suffering or think that they are to seek not seek attention, to seek help.
To seek help for sure.
You know what I mean?
But I think that's become just going on by what you're saying there, it's a societal change that has to happen, right? Yeah. Because if you look at the youth specifically, they're dealing with things that, like my generation, when I was at school, I never had to deal with. Like growing up, I was really bullied really badly at school, but I could go home and it was over for the day. Or if it got really bad, I could change schools. And so I knew there was an end point to it, right? Today, the kids can never get away from it because it happens at school, it happens on the internet, it happens on whatever app they have access to, and it's everywhere, and it follows them around forever. As one thing that they're dealing with. They're dealing with extra expectations in terms of like their education attainment and what they need to get in order to succeed in the world, because the standards are just being risen so much higher. There's extra pressure from parents. Families are not the same as they used to be because the world's got so much more expensive. So now both parents have to work in a lot of families in order for ends to meet. And I'm not taking away from both parents working. I think people need to be able to do whatever they want to do. But I think that definitely affects your resilience factors, right? So that's something that we talk about a lot in mental health, is that people need to have resilience factors in order to be able to kind of deal with all of the issues that go on in the world.
Can you expand on the resilience factors part?
So resilience is like protective factors that you have in your life, right? So family, your economic situation, the stability of your environment that you're living in, where you're living in, the stability of your family home, your access to resources like food, shelter, education, all of that kind of stuff. That will all impact how well you are able to approach life and how well you're able to deal with everything that goes on in your life, right? So if you're coming from a poor socioeconomic or a lower socioeconomic background, and you don't have access to a lot of support systems, or you have come from a broken home, or you come from a war-torn country, for example, which is a lot of what people nowadays are dealing with. All of these little factors are going to impact on your ability to process and cope with the stress from the world. And if you've got low resilience in yourself because of your situation that you're in, and then you're dealing with so many other things that teenagers have to deal with now. It's massively going to impact your ability to cope with life, and then you're going to be more likely to be diagnosed with a mental illness.
Okay.
So it's like a societal change that needs to happen. Like, society needs to take ownership of the fact that we are neglecting a massive group of people and we're not doing enough to protect them. And like, yes, some of them might be using mental health as an excuse, but we're not doing enough to protect the ones that are suffering from it. We're not doing enough to protect kids online from social media and from exposure to things that are going to impact their lives and the ways that they view themselves. I think the media has to take ownership of the fact that what they are portraying and the livelihood that they're portraying to people, that this is what you have to have in order to be cool and successful and whatever else, they have to take ownership of the fact that they are massively impacting a group of people, and we need to start dealing with it. Because if we don't, all these teenagers are going to become adults with even worse mental health problems, and then what's going to happen to society? It's this constant run-on effect. It's just, exactly.
So I have a question, right? I was reading the other day that in more low-income countries, the depression is lower. Reason being is when you're hustling or when you're always on the go, you have less time.
You don't have time to even be depressed.
Okay. Like
Exactly.
that thought can't even cross your mind, because it's either sit and be depressed or
you have no
completely put
choice
that-
because you have to
Exactly.
do things.
Can you elaborate which countries are you talking
So
about?
I'm in general, I'm generalizing a little bit, like lower income, let's say third world
People
first world.
on survival mode.
Yeah.
Let's start with the third world countries. For example, India. I think that's been one of the countries that's been most researched with this topic, and it's just the fact that there isn't sufficient amount of professionals in this field to offer help and to offer these diagnoses. So in India, in a country that's over 1 billion people, the statistic I think is 0.3 psychologists to every 1 million person.
Wow.
So there is a huge gap that needs to be filled in terms of providing professional help to these people, because just like we were talking in the beginning about the societal things that might affect your mental health, in a third world country specifically, where poverty levels are extremely high, that drastically impacts your mental health, especially in terms of depression. Because yes, you might be hustling, but at the same time we have the comorbidity of anxiety and depression. So I'm hustling right now, but what's in the back of my mind is, right now, this money I'm getting right now is going to feed me for the next day. Where am I going to get the next day? And what about the day after that? And where am I going to be? And where am I going to sleep tonight? And if I can't sleep somewhere tonight, where am I going to be hustling there? So all of those factor into that depressive thought. And even though, which is also something we touched on at the beginning, even though you don't show it because you're hustling, you're working, everything, that is still something that you're burdened with. In first world countries where people are more socio-economically able to find help through like free clinics, through even private clinics, and when you go and seek help, even if you're referred to go get counseling, so if you're in a public school, sometimes they do have a counselor working there, so they would offer that help to you. So the chances that you might be diagnosed, even if it's misdiagnosis, which is a topic I want to touch on later, even if you're diagnosed from a young age or an older age, I lost the words. Your ability to get that diagnosis and the fact that it's offered to you is much larger in first world countries.
Yeah, the availability of
solutions.
Support.
So the World Health Organization started a project, I think it was back in 2013, the acronym is like the WHO MGAP. So it's the World Health Organization Mental Health Gap Program.
Okay.
And so what that did is it first started off as a research project, and they kind of went around the world and they gathered information on availability of resources, factors that will impact someone's mental health, factors that'll help someone have better mental health, all of these kinds of things. And then they came up with this plan, and it was from 2013, I think, to 2020. And it was a plan to send resources and everything to countries that had no support for mental health to try and close the gap of the need and the provision. right? So they haven't. It's a super interesting. Like, I'm a geek, right, with this kind of stuff, so I love it. It's 44 pages. You can get it, like, it's long, but it's super interesting because it lays out the background of where the issue comes from, and then what we have to do to fix it, and how you can put provisions in place to do that, right? And so there's been a massive increase, which is why it might look like depression or anxiety or other mental illness rates have increased, because there's been a massive push from nonprofit organizations around the world to go into these different countries and set up mental health practices. Some of them are super cool. So there's like an ACT program that talks about acceptance and something else, I can't remember, acceptance and something therapy. And it looks at people kind of accepting the things that they've been dealt with or that they've been through. And they work a lot with like children soldiers, for example. And they do a lot of work with those communities to try and like reestablish communities and build mental health practices. The only way that these mental health practices work is if it's community led. So you have to go into a community and you have to say, right, the community needs to be on board. We need to accept that there's a problem within the community and we have to do something together to fix it. Because otherwise, when the nonprofit leaves, the support just disappears, right? So it has to be community led, which is why I was saying earlier, the change we have to do has to be society. Because if we're not all on board, we can sit and talk about it until the cows come home, right? But nothing's going to change about it.
Do you think that, let's say 200 years ago, people had, there were more people with mental issues than now? Or is it because they weren't aware of such things, they weren't discovered yet?
I think it's both. It's a combination of both. In terms of the diagnoses being there, the stigma being there, that it's just
and
in
the
your head.
education as well.
And I think that's the thing. So we're currently in May, and I think that's something that started like 50 years ago, which is the World Mental Health Month. And I think that's what they're starting to change, and it's the stigma over it's in your head, you're fine. No, you're just what are you being anxious about? And it's like I'm anxious. That's it. That is the description.
It's just like a state of who you
are. It's a state of mind right now. Just like I can be happy. I don't have to be happy about anything. I'm just happy. But I'm anxious or I am depressed. It doesn't have to be about something. And this change, I think, like you said, in the community is what's going to lead to people, one, understanding that you can't take this as a joke, which is what I'm pretty sure you were suggesting at the beginning. This isn't a joke. Like, if you're sad, you're sad. It sucks. You know, no one likes being sad. But if you're not okay, that's okay. So I think that's the main message we want to give out.
Absolutely.
You know, it's okay to not be okay. If you think that you need help from someone, go to your the people closest to you. And I think that's a touchy one, because sometimes the people closest to you might not understand. If that might be the case, remember, just as much as you'd invest in what food you're going to eat tomorrow, your physical health, your mental health needs to take priority. Okay, because just like if you're healthy physically, you can be healthy mentally. It goes both ways.
Exactly.
So I think that would be the main take from today's talk.
I think, like, to round it up, basically what I'm trying to say, especially for those that are watching, like, if you feel that you are depressed or are anxious or are suffering with some sort of mental illness, if it is available to you and an option, get yourself checked out before you throw it out there. That's one of the main things I wanted to say. If you are suffering and you've been diagnosed and you need some sort of support system, don't be afraid to speak about it. A lot of what I've heard from experiencing it is accepting the struggle you're going through and sort of facing it head on, instead of trying to find, other ways around it, because you're not ever going to get past it without facing it.
For sure.
So all in all, for those watching, if you are suffering, seek out some help. Okay, if you have the option, if you need a friend,
100%. Like you say this about your fitness, prevention is better than cure.
Yes.
So even if you're not at that stage, my opinion is, and I think everyone would agree with this, is therapy is not a negative thing. If you need to talk to someone, go and talk. Go to therapy, talk, let it out. It helps. Okay, you're going to be talking to someone who will not form an opinion but are there to help. And if you just need to talk to someone, they'll listen. And they'll know that you're not looking for advice, you're just looking for ears to hear.
And I think the other question I would pose to people is, if you had the flu, who would you go and see? You would go and see a doctor. Mental ill health, there's nothing different to physical ill health. If there is something that you feel is not right with your body, whether it be internally or externally, you need to go and get it sorted out. And the doctor is just a different person,
Facts.
but it's the same thing.
Facts. Also, last point, just to end it up, if you are a man, it is okay to cry.
Absolutely.
I swear to God, it's fine. It's fine to cry. I swear to you, it's not any less masculine. It's not going to change any of your testosterone levels. Cry, my dude.
Just don't.
Saturday nights, Newberry cigarillos. Swishes make my throat hurt. Rolling OCBs on the side for me. Light 'em up and